Hello, friends. This is Jack Later. That's me there on the elephant. You've probably seen some of my videos before. For most of you guys, I am your sponsor in Empower Network and Instant Payday Network, and I've got a success secret here that I've got to tell you about. Okay, I'm calling it Grandpa's Success Secret, and this is a true story. I've got to brag a little bit about my grandpa because the things that I've learned, primarily because of his influence and also the influence of my mother, his daughter. But I've got to talk about Grandpa's success secret right now because I honestly believe down deep in my heart that this secret itself is the primary reason why he was successful. And this secret that I'm going to tell you about is something that if you apply, you will become successful. Now you're going to be a bit surprised at his secret. Maybe not. Some of you will be, some of you won't. But it's a very simple secret, and some of you may think that it's even archaic. But it's something that is taught even in Empower Network to this day, and it's something that made Grandpa successful even as a rancher during the Depression. Now, so anyway, what is Grandpa's success secret? Now, before I get to that, I just got to tell you the odds that Grandpa was up against when he was young. The reason why I have this picture in the middle here is because this is Grandpa was probably in his early 70s at that time, and it means a lot to me because during that time I was a teenager, and I remember Grandpa putting me to work on his ranch, on his farm, helping to butcher a cow or a steer. What he had done, he had already butchered the steer, and he brought I think it was a half a steer into his garage in a cold environment, and he kept everything on ice. And we spent an entire day. I mean, I'll never forget this. I spent an entire day with Grandpa and my uncle helping to cut up this steer. He was a butcher at one time, and he knew all of the cuts of the all the cuts of meat, the sirloin and the tips and the rounds and filet mignon, all of that. And he put me to work in his garage, just taking care of this beef, and he knew how to cut it up, like I said. And my job, boy, I'll never forget it. My job was to grind the hamburger. And Grandpa, even though he was really successful in his business, he believed in sometimes doing things that required a lot of work. And instead of going out and buying an expensive hamburger grinder, he just stuck with the old hand crank. So I spent the whole day, my whole job for one whole day, probably 10 hours, was to grind hamburger with an old hand crank. Now, that was Grandpa's influence on me. I didn't really appreciate having to work so hard. I appreciate now the lesson, but what we got at the end is he also believed in looking back on your success and appreciating it. So, and at the end of a hard day's work, I had the privilege of having filet mignon from this freshly cut beef, and it was it makes me hungry now because it's almost 7 o'clock when I'm making this, and just the thought of it was so tender. This wonderful filet mignon that my grandpa made. Even after working a full day, probably a 10-hour day, he went to work in the kitchen and cooked up this filet mignon. Anyway, I've got to tell you that because it's important in this secret of success that I've got to tell you about. Now, I've got to go back here. Now, the reason why I'm bringing up this picture is because this is my grandpa when at the right in this picture with his younger brother. And Grandpa only had a ninth grade education, and this is true. He grew up in southern Utah, from a long line that goes back to Mormon Pioneers, in fact. And he kind of inherited this pioneer work ethic of his work ethic of taking a massive and immediate action in everything that he did. here's his parents over here. So this is Grandpa's parents on the left, and they were just very, very poor. Okay, so poor that Grandpa had to quit school at ninth grade and go to work and help support the family. And so, more often than not, the majority of any income that he earned as a young man went to support it, to help support his family. So that being said, a very important element there of his family work ethic. Now I'm going to go on here for a second. The next one is this. These are some successes right here. When he was in his 20s, when he first got married, he was hired as a branch or as a ranch manager. Now this was his this is his success secret. Believe it or not, right here at the top, and we've heard it in Empower Network and in Anticipated Network, and this is his success secret. Okay, Grandpa took massive and immediate action every single day. Okay, especially at the beginning. Okay, now I'm showing here at the left when he was a rancher because he was hired to be a ranch manager for his uncle during the days of the Depression, early Depression. It would have been in the early 30s here. He got married at that time, could hardly afford a house, but he kept working his. But because he believed in taking massive action in everything that he did, his uncle trusted him to this large ranch as a manager. And his uncle would give him bonuses in cattle when he worked extra hard. And so what happened is that after several years, I think about 10 years, 8 or 10 years, he had enough cattle that he accumulated because he took massive action. He earned the cattle one by one. So what he was able to do is to put enough money together. He wanted to go into business for himself. Okay, he put enough money together. He moved to Southern California from Southern Utah, over in the Santa Monica area. And what this is in the middle, it looks like a rundown old building, and I guess this is kind of a bad picture of it. I remember it as a real neat place. He bought this restaurant from an individual who was retiring in about 1946. And this restaurant was right across the street from Hughes Aircraft. And Grandpa saw an opportunity, and he took massive and immediate action. Okay, and he made up a deal with the owner there, who was retiring, to pay him on a contract. And Grandpa did so well in this business because he took massive and immediate action. He saw an opportunity, and he took massive immediate action. He was able to pay this restaurant off, or the owner off, within 5 years, the entire note within 5 years. And again, I mentioned Hughes Aircraft Base because that was it was an important part of the element. Grandpa saw the potential being across from this aircraft base, and workers coming off of their lunch break and possibly dinner breaks, and if I remember right, the aircraft was, I believe they were expanding at the time. I don't remember all the details on that, but at any rate, Hughes Aircraft was a big part of him being successful in the business. So he saw the potential of Hughes Aircraft and this restaurant, and he took massive action. The restaurant had you can see here at the top here, it says at the top of this thing here, the name of the restaurant is called Pickle Bill's, by the way. You see the pickle there. Bill comes from the name of the owner who was previous, so they called it Pickle Bill's. And the name of it's at the top, it says French dip sandwiches. Now, the original owner had a special recipe for French dip sandwiches. I've never had anything so tender. You could break apart the beef with the fork. It was so tender and wonderful tasting. And again, I'm getting hungry just thinking about that one too, because I've had this recipe before, and my family still uses it today, and I've made it. Now, on the right, I'm showing his brother because he and his brother bought this restaurant together. His brother's name is Harvey. So Grandpa and Harvey worked in this restaurant. They ran this restaurant for 25 years. and on a daily basis, especially in the beginning. On any business, guys, I've got to just parenthetically note that in the very beginning, they had to work their tails off. They took daily, massive, immediate action at the very beginning, and they continued to do that throughout their careers, but especially at the beginning. And because of that, as in Grandpa's words, we made money hand over fist in this restaurant. Can you imagine what would have happened if they didn't take action? Suppose they decide to come in, 2 or 3 hours late to work, every other day or whatever. Or, what would happen if they didn't take massive action? I'll tell you what happened. Because they took massive and immediate action, the people who came into that restaurant as customers saw the work ethic in that restaurant. People worked like busy bees in that restaurant, and people were served quickly. Grandpa used to say that people could be served within about 10 minutes. It was a restaurant that was a cafeteria style restaurant. And at the bottom of the restaurant, this is kind of unusual, that it had sawdust on the bottom of the floor. That was part of the ambiance of the restaurant, kind of an Old West style. And it had small tables with small benches, and it was just part of the ambiance. But anyway, people would line up, excuse me, people would line up waiting to get French dip sandwiches all the way out the door, around the front of the building, and all the way to the back sometimes. So they were very busy. They made, like I said, they made money hand over fist. And it's all attributed primarily because Grandpa took massive and immediate action, especially at the beginning. Now I'm going to go on here a little bit further. Now, this is what I think is really amazing about Grandpa. Grandpa even took massive and immediate action when it came, when he found his sweetheart. And my grandmother was an indispensable part of his success as a family person and as a restaurant owner. And I don't want to leave her out of this equation because she's very important. And one day I'll do a separate video just about her and her successes and how that's and what I've learned from my grandmother. But again, my grandmother came from poor family stock too, economically poor, but wonderfully rich family stock as far as their values and stuff. But my grandmother was indispensable to my grandfather, helping him to be successful. But what would have happened if he didn't take massive and immediate action when he found his sweetheart? And he's told me the story. I'm not going to go through the whole story, but when he knew that, when he knew of her and he got to know her a bit, he knew that he had a winner. And he decided he wasn't going to wait. He wasn't going to wait for some other guy to come along. He took massive and immediate action. He said to himself, he says, I'm going to marry that woman. And that's exactly what he did. He took massive and immediate action and proposed to her. And so anyway, you can see my grandparents down here at the bottom together, and they were just wonderful. They really were, guys. They were absolutely wonderful. And that's an old picture of me. I was almost embarrassed to show the picture, but because I was so young then, I was in my early 20s when that was taken. But anyway, she was very indispensable. And again, his success was largely because of her wonderful, loving influence and also very supportive influence. But he took massive action, and it was kind of a domino effect, because he took massive action in picking this wonderful woman. He was also able to be successful in many, many other areas of his life. So I'm going to move down here now. And this is a long story short, but this is what I'm going to sum it up to. You know what? Because of Grandpa's success secret, he was able to retire from his restaurant business at the age of 60. 60, guys. That was 25 years in the restaurant business. But age 60, he was able to retire and live until he was age 91. Okay? As an entrepreneur, Grandpa said that, and this is his own words, he said it to me many times, he says that I made money hand over fist in that restaurant. But guys, it didn't happen in any other way except for he took massive and immediate action. Now, I'm showing a picture here with my grandpa and his son my uncle, his name is Shannon, for a reason. Okay, Shannon was mentally disabled, greatly mentally disabled, and he had the intelligence probably of about a 12-year-old or less, barely able to read. But there's one thing that Shannon learned from his father, my grandfather. Guess what it was? His ability to take massive and immediate action in whatever he did, and an unrelenting work ethic. And even though Shannon was mentally disabled, he was able to support himself for many, many years because of this unrelenting work ethic, this ability to take massive and immediate action. Now, during his older years, my uncle ended up living with his grandfather because of his disability, and my grandfather continued to help my uncle until my grandfather died. But for many, many years of Shannon's life, Shannon was able to support himself, something most people with his kind of disability would never have been able to do. But thank goodness for this gift of taking massive and immediate action from his father. My Uncle Shannon was able to support himself for most of his life. Now, look at the bottom here, referring to my grandpa. Grandpa was able to live out his dreams on his hobby farm in southern Utah. So they moved from Southern California when he retired at age 60. He moved to Southern California. He bought a hobby farm there. He always loved ranching, so he wanted to go back to being a rancher again. And he had cattle and horses and a large garden and a wonderful ranch home there in southern Utah, a place called Leeds, Utah, not far from St. George, Utah. And Grandpa died at the age of 91. But because he took massive and immediate action, he was able to live the last 31 years of his life on his hobby ranch. It was wonderful. He loved it there. Now, what's Grandpa's success secrets again? The main one right there, number one, take massive and immediate action. Massive and immediate action. Number two, do it now. He never put off anything. If something had to be done, he did it immediately. He didn't say, well, okay, I'll do that tomorrow, unless it was something, that wasn't that critical. But most of his success happened because he did it now. He took massive and immediate action. And number two, do it now. And number three, I heard him say it over and over again, go full steam ahead. Now, guys, I hope that this is some encouragement, and most of you probably believe in these principles, and sometimes we just forget. But there's no substitute for taking massive and immediate action. Doesn't matter how wonderful a program is, and heavens knows, Empower Network is a phenomenal opportunity. Guys, I've done other businesses for 16 years, and on the internet, and other businesses, and I've never seen anything as good as Empower Network. So the opportunity is there. The question is will you take massive and immediate action? Will you do it now? Will you go full steam ahead on this so that you could get a momentum going? And you could do this, guys. So take massive and immediate action. You know the importance of getting all in on all the products, for example. It's going to be a challenge for many of you. I realize it's a big sacrifice for many of you, but that's the way that you're going to maximize your income potential, is by taking massive and immediate action in all of those products. The Inner Circle, the Costa Rica Intensive, the 15K Formula, and the new one, the Master's Course even. Now, so take massive and immediate action in your business. Whether it's doing a video a day or doing a blog a day, or more. In my first 90 days, I did 90 videos. I did one video every single day, and that's how I reached $4,300 by my third month. Is because I took massive and immediate action. Now, guys, there's no substitute for this. In fact, if you're trying to use some other principle besides taking action, I don't see how you'll ever succeed. You've got to take massive and immediate action. So do it now. Go full steam ahead. Give me a call if you need help, but take action now. And I hope to see you on the next video. I hope to be able to, I'm planning on doing another video that talks about the success principles that I learned from my grandmother. So take action and go for it.